Hi everyone, I'm Kim here in Northern California, Zone 9B. And on my property here I have about 2.5 acres and I call it Olive City Homestead. Now I've been here about 7 years, but only gardening the last 4. I started off small with just 1 or 2 raised beds, but it's grown quite a bit since then. Today is August 1st and it's hard to believe the summer is 2/3 over. Well, most of the country here maybe, but California, it tends to go into October before it cools off even slightly. In fact, the last 2 or 3 weeks we've had a real heat wave. It's been 105 up to 115 for just days on end, and I've actually been surprised at how well most of the plants have been doing, and you'll see a lot of that today. And yeah, it's going to be my first garden tour. I hope to share with you many more. So come see what I've got going here. My theory is that the easier gardening is, the more we will enjoy it and the more we will do it. So easy gardening is the way to go. And also, I don't believe there is a perfect way to garden or a best way to garden. I think everyone has to find what works for them in their schedule, in their microclimate, and you know, taking into consideration what brings them joy and what they like to eat, and so many different things, so many different factors. So yeah, easy gardening and gardening your way. Now let's go take the tour. So these are some of my sunflowers. I'd say these are about 7 feet tall. And they're lining my storage shed here. They face the south. They're doing pretty well. I planted beans among them, all different kinds, and you know, they didn't do quite as well. Although the ones here on the end, the long Chinese red noodle beans, look at that. They've done really well. And I'm gonna plant a lot more of those. Find the perfect little microclimate for them. Maybe it's here. I try to label well. And I was more successful this year than I have in the past. But I planted, like I said, a lot of beans on this trellis, and they did not all do well. For one thing, this trellis, let me tell you, give you a little easy gardening idea here. Plant better trellises. Build better trellises. Yeah, so here, let me come over here. I've taken out a lot of the beans because they either are done producing or they didn't do well. So you can see here where this vine is trying to wind up. It has here, but it worked so hard, a lot of them just sort of gave out after they managed to wrap around. This kind of square fencing, it doesn't always work so well. You see, they start to wrap around and then they die off. And I'm not sure if it's just because of the fencing, but I did notice that on a lot of the beans, they did that. Not all though. These ones did not have that problem. They've grown up 7 feet at least and are doing well. So, you know, live and learn. I had someone put a trellis in here, and I was not actually going to plant beans here. See, I wasn't thinking ahead enough. I was going to plant just tall flowers like hollyhocks, that kind of thing. So, yeah, what I'm going to do though, this is kind of a simple gardening idea you could use. I'm going to put on hardware cloth to the back of this, or the front of this, it doesn't really matter, but I think it'd be less obtrusive in the back. And then the any vining plant could attach to the wire, but you still from a distance would see the wooden trellis for appearance. So this is part of my back garden. Yeah, look at that. There's a little play kitchen in my chicken run. That's because it was my older kids' kitchen and they really don't want me to get rid of it. So they said put it in with the chickens. So we did. The chickens climb all over it. Okay, so this is one of my gardens. It's my biggest garden. And the main vegetable garden. I do have a few other beds around the property, but this is the main one. And you can see my little shadow there. The sun's coming up behind me and it's coming up fast. So as we go through the garden, you'll notice that plants are in different stages of growth. Some are pretty old. They were planted way back in April because we can plant really early here because it warms up so quickly. It never really gets that cold here in Zone 9B. And then I do successive planting. So I have some plants that I've planted much more recently. And in fact, this week I'm going to start a whole bunch of seedlings. I'm excited about that because I get to start some stuff that really grows best in cool weather for my fall garden. I've never actually done an official fall garden before. I do grow perennials, perennial container vegetables, and perennial vegetable plants in the ground. So that's been great. I only started that last year, and I can't tell you how fun that is and how great it is to have green, thriving plants in the winter that I can actually harvest from and eat, all my kale and collards and spinach and things like that. But for now, we're talking summer, right? Summer. So I do have sunflowers planted here and there all around because, you know, I love them. They're so pretty. Plus they attract the bees, and that's always great. So this little garden I have along the chicken run, the edge of the chicken run, is my herb garden. I do sometimes pop in a little vegetable here and there or a flower, but mostly it's herbs. So this plant right on the end is lemon verbena, which is fabulous for putting in teas. And what do we have here? We've got some thyme, some oregano that has, as you can see, gone to flower, but also lots of new growth coming back. So I like to experiment a lot with plants. And so, you know, if I'm told you should cut something out because it's only an annual, it's going to die, I like to say, well, maybe, but maybe not. Because of my climate, I just like to try and see what happens. So, yeah, this particular oregano bloomed white. It was really, really pretty. It had hundreds of stalks. I only let a few go to bloom because what I did was I harvested them when they got about this tall before they went to flower. And I dried the oregano, and now we have it in the pantry for all year. But then I let the rest of it, a few stalks, go to flower, enjoy the flowers, let the birds come, and lo and behold, the plant itself is surviving and now sending up all new growth. So I'm loving that. We'll see how many years that can go. I have a bunch of liatris planted in here because I love liatris. And that's a perennial bulb. And the bees love it, and it's really intense and fluorescent when it first blooms, and then it just sort of fades away, and yeah, I love it. So this is some lime thyme, new version of lime I planted this year. And here we have some basil that came up from, it's self-seeded. I had some basil here last year, and I didn't plant any here this year, but this one just came out. Oh, that smelled good when I touched it. It's fun how herbs do that, you know, a little aromatherapy there. Now, I put this cucumber, Armenian cucumber, here a while ago because it really wasn't growing well at all. It wasn't growing real well at all. None of the Armenian cucumbers were in the sun, the intense full sun anywhere else. But along the chicken fence here, it gets filtered sun all day, and it's done really well. I have another little video I'm putting up that shows how I harvested a really long cucumber from it just like a week after I planted it. It was amazing how fast it grew. Of course, the chickens got a little bit of a munch on the end of it, didn't you, girls? Yeah, it was a young new plant, so this particular cucumber was hanging really low, and they managed to reach it. Who is that? Oh, well, hello, baby. Oh, you're busy cleaning yourself. Okay, that's one of my mini cats. So what I'll do, I have some cilantro that I let go to seed here, and then now it looks like it's died, but I'll cut it back. It has, I'm sure, reseeded itself, as has been my experience anyway. There we've got some echinacea coming up, and that is winter savory, I believe it's called. And there's some green, I want to say fennel. Okay, so this is a new plant for me, and I just planted it this year, and I even left a tag in. I was wrong. Fennel's that, okay. So fennel looks like, to me, it looks like dill, and I have some bronze fennel somewhere else. This is not fennel, it is sorrel. You know, I got a funny story about sorrel. I planted some from seed. I bought it off eBay, you know, from a reputable site, and I planted it, and you know what? It didn't come up. You know what came up instead? A gorgeous zinnia, which I didn't plant any zinnias anywhere, so I think a bird must have, either a bird dropped that or they sent me the wrong seeds. Here's another oregano I let go to flower, and see, this is a different type, and it produced gorgeous purple blossoms, and it too is sending up new growth down there. Here we have some sage, and down there on the end, that is lemon balm. All right, this bed is a mound, which I need to start replenishing this year. It's, you know, mounds, all soil really, does sink as time goes by, as it settles. So this hugelkultur mound on the very bottom has logs and all kinds of debris, things from my animals, bedding for my animals, and it's done really well. So I have plants planted directly into the soil, and I have plants in pots, and that is a theme you'll see throughout my garden. I'm sort of an eclectic gardener, a relaxed gardener, definitely. I kind of believe in what I think of as slow gardening, which has many meanings for me. It means I can garden slowly instead of being in a rush all the time. And in my advanced age of mid-50s, I'm appreciating that. Also in intense heat, you appreciate the opportunity to go slow. Also, going slow in life, I find, you know, really lets you appreciate things instead of rushing by them and not even noticing them. So, but slow gardening to me also means, you know, learning patience, waiting for things to do what they're going to do, and observing them and responding. Again, if you're not going so quickly and not feeling pressured and rushed, you have an opportunity to change things when you need to. And so this, again, has some things in pots. This very large planting here, as you see, is actually just 2 pots. It's a 1-gallon pot with delicata squash, and a 5-gallon pot which has tipped over and is propped up by stones because a little tip here, when you do put a large pot in soil, you've got to bury it pretty deep. I only had this about 1 inch in the ground, and it really needed to be about 3 or 4 inches at least, because of the weight of the plant. Okay, it does depend on what you put in it. What I have in this plant, and as I take you in closely, you'll see some has broken off, but the plant is still going despite that. Yeah, at least half the plant, if not 2/3, broke off last week, and yet it still is doing well. This trunk is, before it broke off, it was about 4 inches, or at least 3, probably 4 inches around. Now it's about 2 inches around, since over half of it broke off. It's amaranth, which has gorgeous red veined leaves and beautiful, beautiful flowering stalks with the grain on the end. So before it broke from the weight, it was over 6 feet tall, probably over 7 feet tall. Some of its flowering grain stalks were over 2-3 feet long. I had one that was like 3 feet long, yeah. But so no longer is it tall like that, but look at that. It is still green. It's still growing well. It is a bit challenging to actually find the pots, not the big one, but the small delicata, which is what all these beautiful leaves are. You know what? I'm hesitating because actually there's 2 plants. There's a delicata that's in the 1 pot, and then these leaves, there's 2 different kinds of leaves here. Let's see if I can show you. These leaves right here are not the delicata. They're the one that's planted in the ground next to these 2 pots, and they are Amish pie squash. Look at that. They are massive. They've sent out so many vines here into my other beds nearby, and the delicata squash, which kind of, some people think they call it silvery. I don't. I think it just has these kind of off-white veins in the leaves that give it kind of a silvery appearance. It's planted in the soil right next to those pots, so they're kind of intermingling there. Here I've got some dill gone to seed. And then in this middle bed, I have a lot of new plants, or plants I've taken out recently and I'm gonna plant up. The only older plants in this bed are my zucchini, which is, I've already harvested like 25, 30 zucchini off of this at least. And it is in a, you can see it down there, it's in a 1-gallon pot. You know, as I said, I believe in easy gardening, and there's a few reasons that I have some of my plants, probably half of them, in pots. One is that when you water them, you can be sure that the water is getting to the roots. Sometimes when they're in the ground, like I'll show you over here in this bed here, which is just straight in the ground. It's not a raised bed, it's not a mound, it's just straight soil. This is all one plant here. And you can see some of the leaves look older and kind of yellowing. And in all my garden, you'll see a few burned tips here and there, like right there. So if you're a beginning gardener, don't even worry about that kind of thing. If you are, well, I was going to say if you're in a hot zone like I am, zone 9B, but no matter where you are, a little bit like that is not going to hurt your plant. I've cut off probably a dozen leaves, or maybe even 20 that look worse than that. And the plant, it doesn't mind at all. It goes on. And you can get those kind of leaves from watering in the sun and burning your plant, but I don't. I water between 5 o'clock in the morning and 8:30, and it is not above, well, when you get close to 8:30, it's getting up there but to 85 or so, but I only water the ground. I never water on their leaves. I mean, occasionally their leaves might get a tiny bit wet, but again, it's early in the morning. That's the best I can do. I'm not going to come out here and water at midnight, and watering in the middle of the night leads to other problems too. But as I was saying, you can see that some of the plant has sent out new growth. Some of the plant is dark green and smaller leaves. That's because the plant is just thriving and continuing to grow even as some of it ages. I have, this is a pumpkin plant, if I didn't say that. I have 3 large pumpkins on it that came early, and I have a few new little ones starting up now. You can't really see how big these are. In fact, you can't even see that there's 2 of them in there. Plants, fruit and vegetables hide really well sometimes, I'd say. And I've noticed on camera they can be deceptive as far as size. Some of these things, as we go by, you might be like, what the heck is that? So that is an old Swiss chard that has gone to seed. This plant was so gorgeous. I think I have pictures and videos somewhere of this that might show up in another video. When it was, you know, just like 6 or 7 feet tall and like 3 or 4 feet wide and red and green mixed. It was so beautiful. This is a new Swiss chard just coming up here. And then this spring, it went to seed, went to flower rather, and the flower stalks were just enormous. So many and so big, and I thought, okay, it's time to experiment, and I cut them all off. And they came back, and I cut them all off, and they came back. And I did that like 3 times, and they just kept coming back. The last time I cut it way back, way down, and now I've just let it do what it's doing, and we'll see what happens. I have noticed it down low. It sent out a new stalk with new growth. Well, we'll see. I might cut all the rest of it off and just leave that. I'll come over here and show you something because it's related. This was part of that plant. And you can see the big stalk, and yet it has hardly any leaves. That's because when I put it here, it was just a stalk. It was half of that plant. But you can see it's actually sending out a lot of new growth. So, you know, I'm just curious what in the world that's going to turn into. That is a bed I put in this year. You might notice that I get sidetracked sometimes. I'm going to have to work on that for garden chores because I was not talking about this bed.
But this is the bed I put in this spring with cement blocks, and it's working really well, and I love it. And we'll come back to it later. Right, BB? Yes. So go back over here. Sorry for swinging you around to this bed. So what I was saying was about watering. Yes, I remember that. Okay. So when it's directly in the ground, I have to really think when I come over here. Now, I have been watering this all summer, so I do remember now. But at first, it was like, where did I actually plant the plant? Because there's plant hair everywhere. Where are the actual roots to this plant? Well, they're spread out, of course, at this point. But I actually planted the plant right on the other side of that little pot, in the very left of the bed on this side. But sometimes it's a lot easier to water if you can just water right into a pot. Here I water this whole bed because I also have tons of, look at this, little baby okras. I have tons of volunteer okras in here. I thinned out so many of these, but I grew okra in this bed last year, and it just keeps coming up. And I tell you what, okra is the most beautiful plant. The blossoms, if I see one open somewhere today, I'll be sure to show you because the blossoms are gorgeous. So yeah, I still have to figure out a way to cook it that we actually like it. I've tried a few methods, and it's challenging when you didn't grow up with it, you know, the slimy aspect and all. But I'm gonna keep trying. Okay, so this is one of my very first garden beds. I've been here 7 years, as I said, but only been gardening for about 4 years. And the first of those 4 years, I just had like 2 garden beds, I believe. No pots, no containers, just 2 beds. It was this one, which is why you will notice a little grass coming in at the edges. That's a whole nother story, you see. This whole area, let's see if you can see over past the pool and the star jasmine. Well, way over there is grass. Bermuda grass. Yes, I said the bad word, Bermuda grass. So that was over here too. Now I have wood chips everywhere. But this particular bed and one other was put in on the ground with no, I didn't take anything out. I didn't know. So I didn't even put cardboard down. I just put in some logs at the bottom. I did know enough to know that would be a good thing. So they have logs at the bottom rotting, and then it's native soil. I put in native soil, which is, my soil here is a mixture of clay and sand, probably 70% clay, 30% sand. And so, since then I have added potting soil on the top, and I've added, decomposed chicken manure, and I've added food scraps that composted over the winter. And so I've built up the soil since then, but still I get on these particular beds, I get this, and I had to get those out, and I just, I just don't let it spread. I have one other area over by that cinder block bed that I put in that there is Bermuda grass on the ground from those steps there over to the cinder block coming through the wood chips. But if you've put wood chips down, and I've got about 18 inches to 2 feet over there, it's really easy to pull that Bermuda grass up. It's in there it's the long runners, and they're just loosely in the chips. And so that's one of my jobs coming up, is to get those out. And also I'm going to be putting next month a whole nother foot of wood chips all over up there. I noticed I left this was my harvest this morning before I started taping. Tons of tomatoes, some delicata squash, which I absolutely love. That has been my discovery of the summer. I've never had it before, and it is a wonderful squash. It bakes up. I just cut it in half like a boat, scoop out the seeds, which is much easier than scooping out seeds of other squash, because the seeds are really big and kind of dry, even when your squash are that small. Which that is about the size of all the delicata squash I pulled off. This particular one, look at this. It's a twin. It looks like a little, I don't know, a little set of lungs or something. Anyway, the seeds come out real easily, and you bake it for 30 minutes, and it's like mildly nutty, it's squash. It's like a mildly nutty mashed potatoes. It reminds me of butternut squash, but the flavor is not as strong. And I have kind of a, I don't know if I want to say sensitive stomach, but I have to be careful what I eat. I can't eat a lot of strong flavors. They really bother me. So yeah, I really love that terracotta squash. Plus it grows like crazy. The plant grows like crazy and it produces like crazy. I love it. And then I have a bunch of zucchini and yellow squash, some cucumbers, and a ton of tomatoes. I don't usually get this much because mostly I just harvest when I need. I'm going to put this in the shade here, excuse me. There we go. So normally I just harvest as I go, like, oh, I want to make some fried rice, and I go out and get what I need. But this morning there was just particularly a lot that needed to come off, and I thought, I'm just going to do this now before it gets hot. This is one of my perennial plants. It looks a million times better in the winter when it's cool, but it still tastes delicious now, and it's still producing nicely now. This is purple tree kale, and this is one of those plants that in the winter gets really tall, like 6-7 feet. Right now it's about 5 feet tall. Yeah, I have another one right here. It's just so good. I love the taste of this stuff. It's so delicious, and you know, greens all year round. And it propagates so easily because it sends off all of these side shoots, and you just take a thin side shoot and cut it off and pop it in the ground, and there you go. You have another plant. So I have a lot of little collard and kale plants around because of how easy they are to propagate. All right, so this is my old bed, like I told you, and I have in it, well, I harvested all onions. I had a ton of onions in there that I've harvested. So right now, as you can see, there are a lot of zinnias. Those are just volunteers, and I probably thinned out just as many before these flowered. I planted like 2 zinnia plants in here the first year, 4 years ago, and every summer, every spring rather, they all pop up, and they're really, really pretty for the first month or so. These have been along with me, they and all the other plants, they have been dealing with the intense heat, but they're doing okay. And anyway, I just have a few pots in here. I've got a new squash plant planted, a new yellow pear tomato. This is my lemon tree, and I'll tell you what, this tree was out front and it did not do well there. It just struggled, and it never produced anything. And at one point it had not a single leaf on it, and I said, okay, enough's enough. I'm moving it to the backyard. I don't know why I thought that might work, but you know, things were growing well back here. So I moved it back here, and I, for several weeks, put a ton of coffee grounds around it, and really consistent with the watering, because even though everywhere I read said you don't need to water your citrus except like once a week, that does not apply here, I'll tell you that. So it came back, and now I have tons of lemons, and I can say the same for my lime tree. It did the same thing with that one, and it's thriving now, and it's in a container, a 15-gallon container, and I'll show you it when we get over there. This is a butternut squash in a container. I think I've got one still hanging on there, yeah. And then I have a bunch of tomatoes in here and cucumbers. I think there's probably cucumbers. I find more than any other vegetable are a hide. They really hide, and I can look and look and not see any, and then I come out here another time looking for something else, and I glance over and I see like 5 cucumbers that I have no idea. Like, I could swear there's none on here right now, but I know there are because last night when I was out getting something else, I glanced over and I saw a bunch of cucumbers on here. Oh well, I will come back and get them another time. So yeah, I have a bunch of yellow pear tomatoes in here, and I just harvested this week a ton of big tomatoes, and this morning a couple of those big tomatoes came off of those plants there. I have not liked this particular plant. It looks kind of like it's suffering. See all the leaves curled and everything? Yeah, this is supposed to be a plant that it's one of the few I didn't plant from seed. I bought 2 of them, and there was supposed to be, I can't remember the name. They are a hybrid that is supposed to do really well in intense heat, and I thought, oh, I gotta try that. No. No, this is a little zucchini plant just starting. Not really just starting to produce. I've gotten like 4 zucchini off of it so far. another one of my cats. Not really, it's a cookie jar. I just thought I'd put it in there, telling the mice to stay away. I don't really have much of a problem with critters here. You'd think I would. I have tons of jackrabbits, but they're down front and they have never come back here. They better not. But one thing I do have is possum. They usually don't cause me any problem, but I did recently have them digging in the garden, so I set a live trap, and I caught 9 possum, one after the other, 9 nights in a row, and we catch and release. In California, we're allowed to do that. You're also allowed to kill anything that bothers anything on your property, but I would never ever do that. So we just release them by a nice shady creek a couple miles away. So, oh look, there's a delicata squash growing on the side of the bed. How convenient. So I have melon in here too. I pulled out so many melon, green nutmeg melon and emerald gem melon. Oh, there's a little one. Sometimes they grow just tiny like this, and sometimes they grow about 5 times that big, like a large cantaloupe. And they taste a lot like a cantaloupe, but they're more flavorful. Both of those varieties, much more flavorful, and I really like them. I pulled a large watermelon off of this little plant here. I love this plant. You see the speckles on the leaves? This is a Moon and Stars watermelon plant, and I have a couple of them here. And the watermelon itself is deep dark green with little yellow spots like that. Those are the stars. And then each watermelon has one large oval yellow spot. Large like 2 quarters side by side, but in an oval. And that's the moon. This is my artichoke bed, and artichokes come up and grow in February, March, and April. I harvested tons of them in April and May, and then they die back. I cut the leaves off. I use them as compost, and they grow new pups. So I have new artichoke plants growing in here. So they are perennial in that way, and I've had them growing in here for 3 years now. I have this spaghetti squash growing in a 1-gallon pot in here. And there's a spaghetti squash starting up. It's about 7 inches long. And I have, what's that? That's a yellow crookneck squash. So this is another bed. This one and that one are beds that are everything, well, not everything. About half the stuff in them is planted in the soil and half is in pots. And I was telling you why I did that. In addition to the watering aspect, making the watering easier, it's a little easier on me because it's, up a little higher. I can get to it a little easier. And also, I just have found less issues with like slugs and snails. Far less issues when they're raised up in a pot like that than directly in the ground. But I've never really had a problem with slugs and snails with squash, so I've just continued to plant those right in the ground for the most part. But I do even plant some of those in pots just because of several reasons. So I will show you that back section. That back section there, until this is, let's see, the second year. Last year was the first season that I planted up there, because until last spring, I couldn't plant there. That was a basketball court. So it was cement, a big basketball court. Yeah, until last spring. And I had it jackhammered out, all the cement carted away. And then I piled 2 feet at least of wood chips on top of it. But because, there's the soil under those wood chips was compacted hard clay. And it had been that way for 25, 30 years under the basketball court. So I didn't feel comfortable planting directly in it, obviously, and I couldn't plant, well, I could have planted directly in the wood chips I put down, but I wasn't sure exactly how that would go. So for the most part, I planted in pots up here, and I'm watering, of course, all the time, so those wood chips are breaking down. I did plant in a few places in the ground. Right here in this middle bed, I put a little bed in here. I didn't do this last year. I did this one this year. And so I added soil. I added a layer of manure on top of the wood chips this spring, and food scraps and dead leaves, artichoke stalks, that kind of thing. And then some soil. And it's settled way down, so now it only looks about 4 or 5 inches above the wood chips. But I've harvested
several different plants out. Sorry about that, my camera cut out for some reason. But yeah, I planted new plants recently and they're doing better than the first round, so I think the soil has had a chance to settle. I think that the food scraps and the manure and all of that has had a chance to compost down and everything's melding well, and yeah, the plants are starting to do well in here. So this centerpiece here, you can't see it anymore because it's covered in plants, but there is a fire pit rim, and within the rim is chocolate mint, which has been here for 2 years because I put this here last spring. Let's see if I can get to the rim. There it is, see? So yeah, chocolate mint. Oh boy, is that good in tea, and oh my goodness, does that smell wonderful. And then in the 15-gallon pot, I have lemongrass, and growing right up through the middle of the lemongrass is Amish pie squash. In fact, this little 3-gallon pot has the Amish pie squash planted in it that I grew from seed, and it sent out a long vine there, and it sent one through the lemon grass to the other side and sent out a long vine over there. And I have this thing that I'm sure you can't tell how big this is right here, but it's got to be at least 30-35 pounds. This particular Amish pie squash specimen. It's just huge. Just huge. Yeah, it's just huge. And I can't wait to try it. And then on the other side, there's another one that's at least 20 pounds. And I've got up some pots here with various things. Walking onions everywhere. Love walking onions. They're perennial. They're wonderful. They're so easy to propagate. That's a merit collard that I grew from a cutting. More volunteer tomatoes. I tell you what, all the tomatoes that you see in this section right here are from one single pot, and it is a 1-gallon pot. I keep emphasizing that because I hear so many places you can't do that. You cannot grow vegetables in a 1-gallon pot. Well, if the pot is sunk a few inches into soil or wood chips, and there's rich decomposing wood chips and food scraps and manure and stuff in the soil, and it's got rich soil for the roots to leave the 1-gallon pot and go down into that soil, then you most certainly can grow in 1-gallon and 3-gallon pots, let alone 15-gallon or bigger than that. So do you hear that water running? I need to go turn that off. That is, hello girls. That's my duck's pool, which is overflowing. I let it do that because you see all this wetness here? It will all be dry in like 2 hours because of the heat. Meanwhile, they get to play. The black duck is a chocolate runner. He's the only male of the group, and his name is Batman. And then the 5 girls, the one getting in the pool right now is a blue runner. Runners are more erect than other ducks, and the rest of the ducks are a variety. I have a Saxony, a buff, a silver appleyard, and a harsh. A Welsh harlequin, not a harsh Wellington. Yeah, I love my ducks. I only got them 4 months ago. They're 4 months old. And I almost didn't get them because everybody told me they're so messy and they're such hard work. And I tell you what, I didn't find that to be true at all. They're wonderful. They're beautiful. They're easy to take care of. And they were not messy at all. You just have to know what to do and what not to do, and then it's fabulous. So yeah, I'm so happy I got them. You know, my ducks and my chickens both produce eggs for me. That's the technical reason I have them. They also produce wonderful manure. Well, the chickens do. I mean, you know, I use their bedding, but the ducks, I guess I could use their bedding too. They have a far less, you know, I have far fewer of them than my chickens, but yeah. But the main reason I found that I keep them, aside from the eggs, is because they relax me so much and amuse me and entertain me. They're so fun and interesting, and I can watch them. If I didn't have anything else calling out for my attention, I could watch them for hours. Yeah, they're great. I encourage everyone to have chickens and ducks. So, you know, I was going to be really organized with this tour and go plant by plant, and that's just not happening. This is already really long, and I think I'm going to cut it short. Look at this. This is another Merit collard that I took a cutting from, put it in this little 1-gallon pot. You know what it looked like when I planted it, people? It looked like this. That doesn't look like, yeah, see that? It says black. What does it say? Black Valentine bush beans. Yeah, that's what it was before. And then after I finished harvesting all those and the plant died back, I put this little Merit collard cutting in, and it doesn't look like much, but I can tell it's gonna take. I can tell that already. And I'm gonna have another one just like that one in a few months. And then, people, it will look like this. And in the winter, this will be much, much taller. I can tell you that because it really was much taller. This one, though, actually, as you can see, has spread wide. And I really should cut off some of the side branches or they're going to break. But, oh well, if they break, then I'll cut off the little shoots and plant them. And I guess I need to start giving them away because I really don't need this much collard. But okay, so this bucket is empty, but it's usually full of water. I have 6 or 8 of the buckets around the garden, and they're full of water, and I put yellow leaves and leaves with too much bird damage or that have been burned by the sun or whatever, you know, in the, like for instance, I'll just break it off like this and put it in the bucket because, you know, I learned this from Robbie on Robbie and Gary. It's the easiest way to make compost tea. In just 3 or 4 days, the water will smell the high heaven, and that's a sign it's ready. And I can feed it to my plants. I don't have to buy fertilizer, people, at all. You know, I realize I've said people like 3 times in the last couple of minutes. I have to work on that. That's how I talk to my teenagers. Okay, people, let's go. So, friends, I have to work on, what should I call you guys? Friends, gardeners. It doesn't matter. Okay, so here's one of my, I think this is my favorite sunflower. I mean, I like the darker colors, the autumn shades better, but this sunflower bush I love because it starts early and it just goes all season and into the fall, and it just keeps sending more and more and more blooms. It's so gorgeous. I just love it. This is a volunteer because I planted this bush here last year, and then of course it all died back, but it had dropped so many seeds it grew another one this year, which makes me really happy. So yeah, I think I should probably cut this short because it's long. It's like, I don't know, 40 minutes or something. And I know I'm not done, but you've gotten an idea of what my garden is like back here in this section anyway. I do have a fruit and nut orchard that I've planted over the last 3 or 4 years. It now has over 55 trees in it, and I got a pretty good harvest off of some of the older trees, the 3-year-old trees this year. I have pears, apples of all kinds, peaches, plums, pluots. I'm not gonna be able to remember them all. Let me think. Cherries, lots of citrus, kumquat, lemon, lime, orange, and tangerine. Now, I have to admit, on this citrus, I've only harvested kumquat and lemons before, but this year it looks like I'm gonna be harvesting a lot more. But I got tons of peaches this year, and there's a lot of pears. I got a few cherries, even though it was only the first year. What else do I have? Pomegranate, figs. I get tons of figs. And now I'm planting new fig trees from cuttings. And my dad brought me a fig tree yesterday. It's a tiger, so it's striped. It's one I was going to get next spring, and it has like 8 fruit on it. I'm so excited. That was really sweet of him. He was a landscaper when I was growing up, and then when I was in college, he started a plant nursery. And you might think that, oh, that's why she has a garden. No, I really, he worked out of town when I was young, and then after I went to college, he started his nursery. But I didn't get any knowledge from him But I do think some of it rubbed off on me, maybe by osmosis or something. And it's just now coming out, now that I have time to get outside, or, you know, that my kids, most of them are grown. I have a lot of kids, but most of them are adults now. My two youngest are home with me, and they are 17 and 14. But I have a lot more time available to me now. I am, as I mentioned before, in my mid-50s, but I'm here to tell you that as a middle-aged woman gardener, you can do this. You can do it alone. You can do the homestead thing as a middle-aged woman homesteader alone. I mean, I'm not anti partners, but for me, the last 7 years, I've been single, and I finally am able to live out this dream, and I'm not going to let that stop me. I'm not going to let my age or the fact that I don't have a partner at this time stop me from doing what I want to do. And I'm really enjoying life. I really am. And I hope to be able to share with you what I learn as I go, because I don't believe there is a perfect way to garden, and I have in the past. Probably what kept me from gardening for so long, in addition to being a very busy person, was the fact that I would read and hear about how hard it was, you know, and how you had to buy all these expensive things, and you know, soil and fertilizer, and you had to be on this regimen of that, and putting in a drip line. And my dad was really into drip line. He still doesn't know why I don't have drip line, but I enjoy hand watering. I find it meditative, and it's how I keep track of what's going on in the garden. And lately I listened to either podcasts or YouTube videos as I garden. I learn as I garden, as I water. And so yeah, anyway, I didn't because I thought I had a black thumb. I killed every houseplant I've tried to grow, which was very few after I kept killing them all. I stopped. Oh, look at all those lemon cucumbers I need to take off. Yep, I'll do that very soon. So I'm just here to tell you that really there is not a perfect way to garden. Gardening, you have to do it your way, which will depend on where you live, your climate, and the microclimates on your property, which I have so many of here. So those crates you see up there, those two red ones and that blue one, they're in the shade of a really old apple tree I should definitely cut out because it's rotting away, but it keeps growing apples, so I haven't yet. But they're in that shady area. They get some filtered sun, and that's where all my Malabar spinach is growing up the wire fence and doing wonderfully well. So yeah, microclimates are so important. But I didn't know anything about all that. I didn't realize that you can experiment and try things out and change things up. I didn't know anything about perennial vegetables. I didn't even know they existed until a couple of years ago. And so I'm just want to share the knowledge that I've gained, and I'm still gaining every day, and so that you will understand that gardening your way is how you will find success with gardening, whether that be with vegetables like these here, or with fruits and nuts like the ones I have planted all over the property. I have pecan trees growing now, and hazelnut and almond, or whether it be with flowers, which I have branched into in the last 2 years. I never thought I would grow those. I'll have to give you a tour of some of my flower gardens soon. But they bring me such joy too. I can go outside and sit with a glass of wine or iced tea or my coffee and just look at all their beauty, and I have fun with trying new ones and learn to accept failure and defeat as just part of the process, part of the learning process. It really frees you up to just enjoy the gardens that you plant and not worry so much about them. And yeah, I might sound a little excited and maybe even a little intense, but that's because it's been such a life changer for me. It's really it's changed my life in many ways. Yeah, made me a lot more confident, even though I thought I was pretty confident before. And it's helped me mellow a lot too and worry less about everything. And that's good for my health in every way. So that is my end of July, beginning of August vegetable garden tour. And I will be back soon with more for you. But until then, remember, gardening your way whether it be container gardening vegetable plants or a fruit orchard or raised beds or hugelkultur or a big mix of all of the above. It can work beautifully, it can work productively. You can do it and have a lot of fun along the way. See you next time.